All right, All-Seeing Arbiter. 4 colorless blue for a 5/4. Flying Avatar. When All-Seeing Arbiter enters the battlefield or attacks, you draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Whenever you discard a card, thanks for the follow by the way, whenever you discard a card, target creature an opponent controls gets -X -0 until your next turn, where X is the number of different mana values among cards in your graveyard. This just feels like it should be really good, right? It's a 5/4 flying, so it's already going to be a little bit of a nuisance. When it attacks or enters the battlefield, you get to draw 2, discard 1. So you get the best type of looting, right? And then after you discard, you just get to pick a creature that's going to be smaller each turn. Worst case scenario, it's going to be like -2 or -3, right? That's actually pretty valuable. Now, I don't know how many of the current blue decks want this type of creature to be their top end to attack with. Because obviously, for a while, we're going to be living under Hullbreaker, under Leer. Even just activating your Hull, the Storm Giants, and attacking, that's still going to be a thing. So the only thing holding this back for me is that I just don't know if it's as good as the other options those decks have currently, right? But it's hard not to be at least interested in a thing that's a 5/4 flyer that draws 2 cards for 6 mana and then draws 2 every turn, right? Like, not just draws 2 every turn and shrinks another creature effectively, right? Like, these are all real things. So I would think, actually, you know what? All right, because while we're doing this, I'm trying to think of applications for some of these cards. So like I said, I don't want to just write things off. But maybe this goes into some type of ramp deck, right? Some Simic plus, whatever that other color would be. Maybe it's a Teamer, whatever. But with all the treasure and whatnot, you can ramp into this pretty quickly. And you would be getting to reload your hand somewhat from that ramping because you get to draw the 2 cards. This might have a spot in a couple of decks. I'm gonna say, like, I don't think this is top tier, but I do think this is playable. Matter of fact, I will try to put this into a couple of decks, I'm sure. Hey, thank you for the follow there, Wes. Those of you that just joined, we're going through all of the cards in New Capenna, so we're trying to make our way through all of them. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I will try to respond to them as we go through this. Backstreet Bruiser. Colorless and a blue, 3/3 defender. As long as there are 2 or more counters among creatures you control, Backstreet Bruiser can attack as though it didn't have defender. I assume this is mediocre to bad. I mean, it's a 3/3 for 2, which is all cute, but the last few times we've had these types of things with stipulations, we haven't really played them. It's a rogue, which could matter. If you have enough things that are putting counters, sure. But the problem kind of becomes, like, unless you're going to have a 1 mana thing with a counter, and or something on turn 3 with counters, you're not really even going to get to attack with this on turn 3. Like if you play this on 2, and then on 3 you play some 3 mana thing that gets like a shield counter, well, you still have a 2/2 you can't do anything with. Now, admittedly, it blocks, and that's real, because it does stop several things. But is that enough? I don't know. I'm really not sure. It's possible, but I'm going to say for now, if it is in an aggro deck, or a deck period, it probably is going to be some type of aggro thing that cares about counters, but it's going to be hard for me to put money on this one. Broker's Veteran. 2 colorless and a blue for a 2/1. When Broker's Veteran dies, put a shield counter on target creature you control. This is almost interesting, right? Like, it's a human, so that might matter somewhere along the line. It's a 2/1 for 2, which is blah, it's fine. But when it dies, you get to protect something else. The problem is, a lot of times you're going to, right, like, are you going to not play this on 2? So if it just dies and has nothing to put a counter on, it's kind of lame. So in a lot of cases, you're just not going to play this. There's just going to be better things you could do at 1, 2, and 3 mana that you're likely just not going to consider this card. Case the Joint. 3 colorless and a blue. Instant, draw 2 cards, then look at the top card of each player's library. This feels like it has to be somewhat playable. The fact that we already have several cards that cost 4, over the last couple of years that draw 2 in some variety and come with some other ability. This lets you look at each player's library, though, and there's something to be said for that, right? To know what your opponent's drawing and what you're going to draw. That could shape some of your plays for the turn. Now, I think we still have, like, Behold the Multiverse and all that other stuff still legal. So this likely doesn't get played anytime soon. I mean, hell, you still have Memory Deluge that costs 4, right? So you're probably at best not going to get to play this until like the fall rotation. And even then, I don't think it's guaranteed. So a little bit sad. It's an interesting card, but probably not good enough. Cut your losses. 4 colorless, blue, sorcery, casualty 2, meaning you can sacrifice something that has power 2 or more to copy this spell. And then target player mills half their library rounded down. Let me say this. We had this card before. I believe it was Traumatize was the card. Mill half your library. I remember getting to tell a story to somebody that I won a game getting hit with 3 Traumatizes. And they didn't understand how that was possible. The problem is it's simply math, right? If you have, I don't know, let's say we've got 40 cards left in our library. You hit us with this thing, we mill half. All right, it's 20. The other one resolves. Okay, cool, that's 10. That's not really any better in a lot of cases than like Tasha's Hideous Laughter that got copied or whatever, right? Now, there are some scenarios where I don't know, you ramp into Cut Your Losses, you're copying it, you're sacking a thing, sure. But the mill decks often aren't going to have creatures they want to sacrifice because they're playing like crabs, and those are just 0 power. So the reality is, 1, we'd have to have an environment that has mill decks that also want creatures. And then 2, just being able to kill somebody once we get them low on cards and not let them recover. So I don't think this card is that good, but I do find it interesting. I said, I don't think it's great, but it's interesting. Yeah, I agree. But the problem is, with rogues, the current rogues we're getting don't necessarily want the graveyards full anymore. Like, we have a rogue that still wants a graveyard full, like technically 2 of them, but are those decks going to want to play a 6 mana thing, right? Like, that's just not what they're looking to do. Can you play it in there? Sure. Would you have a thing to sacrifice? Most likely. But, like, they're not wanting to rock 6 mana. Plus, if your rogues are doing their thing, and let's say you got your opponent down to 20 cards, well, then now this is even worse because it's just mill 10, mill 5, right? So it actually milled even less than it would when they were at like 40 cards or whatever, just because you're dividing each time. So, it reads really big and scary, but I don't think it's nearly as big and scary as people think it is. Disdainful Stroke, we all know what this is. It's going to be playable. Nah, not much else to say about this one. Cool art, though. If there's a version of Disdainful Stroke I want to play, it's probably this one. Oh, your friend can use it in his mill XL. You can, but I don't think it's necessarily that good. Echo Inspector, 3 colorless and a blue for a 2/3 bird rogue flying. When it enters the battlefield, it connives. I mean, there's a lot of connive cards. I don't think this is one we want to play. I mean, I get it. It's a 4 mana 2/3 that technically could be a 4 mana 3/4 with flying, but still 4 mana. You know, I know it sounds silly, but it's still 4 mana. And I don't know if these decks want to be sitting around or getting rid of relevant cards. Because, like, here's the other concern I have with this, right? Like, let's say you are playing a connive thing on 2. All right, you draw and discard something to put a +1/+1, right? You connive on 3. You draw a card, discard a card, put a +1/+1. Like, when you get to connive with the Echo Inspector, if you've been discarding non-land things so that you can get the counters, how many non-land things do you have left in your hand? Right? So, as much as people, when I first reviewed this card, were saying like, oh, but it's mostly going to be a 3/4 flyer. I'm like, is it though? Like, if you're playing the aggressive deck that wants to be playing something on 2, on 3, on 4, on 5, or trying to bounce stuff so you can get through or whatever, like, is this really going to have a high probability of being a 3/4? Because again, you've already discarded 2 other non-land cards on your previous turns, in addition to casting 2 spells, right? So probably will be, because again, you're getting to see extra cards or whatever. but I don't think that's automatic. So probably not going to be played much unless Connive is super big and they end up just not having a lot of options in the colors you want to play. But generally speaking, I don't think this is that good. Errant Street Artist. Actually, it's Errant Street Artist, not an Errant Street Artist, which does make somewhat of a difference phonetically. Phonetically, not structurally. Blue for a 0/3 flash, defender, haste. Pay a colorless and a blue, tap it, copy a spell you control that wasn't cast. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, I will say this. Whereas the other 6 mana thing was not necessarily great for mill decks, this actually could be. Because the current version of the mill decks are playing like 8 copy spells or whatever. Well, the copied spell is not cast. You cast the thing that makes the copy, then the other copy goes on the stack. This would be able to copy that for an additional 2 mana. Now, that's a lot of mana. Don't get me wrong. You'd have to have like 1 or 2 plus your spell plus another 2. But if you got it, could be kind of neat. I'm not sure what else I'd really copy with this. It is interesting that it has haste, so you can copy the turn it comes into play, which I guess is fair. With it only being an 0/3, you want to get some value out of it. But yeah, I'm not sure what else we're supposed to do with this right now. So that's my first obvious idea. There may be something else, but hey, Beerwiser 530, how's it going? So there may be something else there. I don't know, but yeah, that's probably all we're going to be able to do with it. Also, side note, for those of you that don't know, those numbers below my camera here, if they both go over their goal, next Tuesday's stream will be a giveaway stream. So we've met the subscriber goal. We're now just needing to hit the follower goal, which we almost always hit the follower goal first. It was just backwards this time. So yeah, if you're thinking about following, please follow because it increases the odds that we're going to get to do a giveaway next Tuesday. Even the score, 3 blue and an X. Instant, this spell costs 3 less to cast if an opponent has drawn 4 or more cards this turn. Not often you're going to get the discount, and then you draw X cards, except for mirror matches probably. But yeah, this card's good. It's going to be played. It draws a bunch of cards. It does it at instant speed. There's really not much to say otherwise on this card. It's the late game card that a lot of the decks are going to want, right? Wait your turn out, see if you do anything, if they have to use mana or not. If not, boom, they're going to draw like 6 cards. That's probably going to be pretty common with this thing. Expendable Lackey. Blue, 1/1, human citizen. Blue citizen. Colorless and a blue, exile expendable lackey from your graveyard. Create a blue 1/1. Whoa, what was that? A 1/1 blue fish creature token. Hey, first time chatter, thank you. That can't be blocked. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, I wish you could actually activate this as an instant. Would be a big deal. So, like at the end of your opponent's turn, maybe you go ahead and make the fish, and then you can attack. But meh, this likely doesn't see a lot of play. I mean, it's cool if you have some deck that wants to make the fish or some deck that wants citizens, but yeah, I don't think this is really what we're looking to play. Draw spells are way better than Days of Blue Sun Zenith. Draw spells are just good in general. Fairy Vandal. A colorless and a blue for a 1/2 fairy rogue. Flash, flying. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Fairy Vandal. This is a reprint too, I'm pretty sure. So, again, if we're playing some deck that you get bonuses for putting +1/+1s on things, we can at least consider it. But outside of those, it's not a real exciting card. It's pretty mediocre to bad in most cases. Hey, thanks for the follow. If I recall correctly, I think it debuted in Eldraine. Yeah, I think so as well, Kingfisher. Oh, does it go all the way back to Ravnica? I know there was an Eldraine one for sure. All right, Hypnotic Grifter. Blue for a 1/2 creature, human rogue, 3 colorless Hypnotic Grifter connives. Draw a card, discard a card, that whole thing. If connive is a big deal and you are getting a lot of triggers from drawing cards and other things, like this is actually a really quality card. Like it's a 1/2 for 1, so it's not bad, right? It can hold its own in the early couple of turns. But 3 isn't that big a deal, especially considering you can do this at instant speed. You don't even have to do it on your turn. So you can leave mana up, your opponent doesn't do anything, you don't need to kill anything, counter anything, whatever. Go ahead and pay 3. draw and discard, draw and discard, right? Like, and then you're growing this creature. So I think this is actually a really serviceable card. I was gonna say like if connive is a big thing in your deck, but it might borderline maybe just be playable in some other decks just because. I don't know. But I think this is one that's better than it reads, honestly. If you're looking for quality binders, sleeves, dice, deck boxes, or other supplies, be sure to check out Ultrapro's Smoke Gray collection this month over at shop.ultrapro.com/PowrDragn and use promo code PowrDragn to save 5%. This is Ledger Shredder, colorless and a blue for a 1/3 bird advisor flying. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Ledger Shredder connives. You know, I initially wanted to just like write this card off, but for 2 mana, it's too good. Like, this will show up somewhere, right? Like, it's a 1/3 for 2 that flies. If you play anything behind it, it gets to connive. Very likely going to be a 2/4. You know, like, this is reasonable. And again, if we're playing some deck that cares about your second spell, because there are now, what, like 6 cards or something that say second spell this turn, that could make. Also, it says when a player casts their second spell, so not even just you. So if your opponent does 2 things in a turn, you know, maybe plays a creature, plays something to protect a creature or whatever on the same turn, you get to connive as well. So yeah, maybe this is a thing, right? Like this has to see some play, right? I'm not willing to accept that this card isn't going to get played. So I'm gonna say yes, give this a thumbs up, that this is actually playable. You play mono blue aggro the Mythic Ladder. I'm on the fence about this card. I think it's worth considering. I really do. A little chat. A colorless and a blue. For an instant, casualty 1. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. This is a cool, versatile card. To like look at 2, you get to keep 1, get rid of 1. It's not a bad way to just get rid of wasted creatures that you don't want. Little 1/1 tokens, right? Get to draw 2 cards. You get to look at 2, keep 1, look at 2, keep 1. That's actually pretty good for 2 mana and sacrificing a 1/1. Now, is this deck going to find a way to have a deck that both has this card and some 1/1 aggro creatures? Like, it's a little bit harder to say, but it can be anything 1 or greater. So, yeah, I'm going to say this finds some way to be played. I just don't know how soon. But I feel like there's enough value here, especially at instant speed, that this is worth it, right? Because you can even chump block with something that may end up dying, and you're like, cool, I'm going to cast a little chat. Go ahead and sack this to the casualty, and that seems okay. You know, I'm kind of down with that. I think this makes Dimir control work, like gas, twitches. Yeah, obviously, that's exactly it, right? Those have small creatures that you don't really care if they die. So this is pretty legit. This is a real card. Majestic Metamorphosis. 2 colors and a blue. Instant until end of turn. Target artifact or creature becomes a 4/4 angel artifact creature and gains flying, and you draw a card. There's some world where a blue aggro deck. Now, I'm not saying mono blue, but blue aggro, whether that's 3 color, 2 color, whatever, could actually play this card. And it draws a card. Hell, again, it could be that whole Magecraft, play a second card, whatever spell, like this turns one of your things into a 4/4, possibly getting bonuses if they're targeted or whatever, and then additionally getting to draw a card that maybe is something else you can cast. So like, there's a couple of decks that can play this. I wouldn't worry about this. It's a common anyway. It's probably only going to show up in a couple of decks all season, but you know, it's not garbage. And it's a good defensive card too. So yeah, obviously in limited you play this because it's almost like a surprise kill card, and you get a card to replace it because it's a cantrip, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm into it. I think this card is actually usable. Make Disappear. A colorless. Is that they have stained glass on the floor in this picture? Is that what's going on? And then it's just an outline from somebody getting pushed through the ground. That's almost like cartoony, that somebody fell from the ceiling and then fell through the floor. And there's like, you know what? We're just going to put a rug over this. And we're just going to act like Joey was never here. Like, like that's sort of what's going on in this picture. It's like such a weird ass thing. But anyway, a colorless and a blue, instant, casualty 1, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. This is just quality, right? You counter a spell, so it's not even a limitation on what type of spell. So this is actually pretty cool. And you could make it to where they pay 4. Also very cool. Now, this is as you cast the spell that you have to commit to sacrificing. So you can't see if they pay 2 and then sacrifice 1 and then they pay 2. But even then, being able to block somebody's thing out for 2 mana, a blue and a colorless at that, and you sacrifice a creature to make it bigger, like this could be a cool addition to some of the like aggro decks that are splashing blue. This could be powerful. Making your opponent's stuff cost 4 more. That's big. That's real big. So yeah, this probably finds a way to be played. Now, probably only like 2 copies in some decks or whatever, but I think this is going to find a way to get some play. Oh, you're talking about the other card? Yeah, it gets play in historic version of running with scissors. Yeah, for sure. Kingfish says, I think he broke through the stained glass into the marble stonework. That's even worse. That hurts way more. Like, that's even more violent. Yeah, cool card, though. Really cool card. Obscura Initiate. 2 colors and a blue for 2/2 flying. Pay 2 mana. Obscura Initiate gains lifelink until end of turn. Not constructed playable. This is not something we're looking to do. It's fine and limited, and you get a 2/2 flyer, which is alright, and you can have lifelink, which is cool, but not generally something you're going to be looking to play. An offer you can't refuse. You know what? Did we get You Owe Me a Favor in here? I just realized that. I don't think we got, like, You Owe Me a Favor or Welcome to the Family. I don't think we got either of those 2 cards. Because I feel like we should have got all the mob things, and those are 2 that we're missing. And Kiss the Ring. We didn't get a Kiss the Ring either. An offer you can't refuse. It's a blue and an instant counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. This one's just weird. You know, like, I know everybody's saying, oh, you can counter your own thing and then you get 2 treasure and blah. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, but like you're expending a bunch of your own cards, and then even when you try to do what you want to do, your opponent might have something that makes you pay 2 more or gets rid of the card you're trying to cast. So like Magic Christmas Land, this might work that way. I don't know. In regular usage, would you want to counter a thing and give your opponent 2 treasures? I don't know. But I will say this. If I'm playing a deck that already wants treasure, and I happen to be playing blue, this could be alright. Especially late game, where you get like some 1 or 2 mana thing that's some little 1/1 or 2/2 that isn't that good at that stage of the game. If the treasure coming into play is more powerful for you, that could be pretty reasonable. And then late game, you have the backup of being able to counter somebody's thing, right? Like, there's going to be situations where you counter the board sweeper, you counter the meat hook, the Doomscar, whatever. Okay, cool. You don't mind doing that, right? Especially if it's already later in the game. Whatever's whatever. The problem is early game, where like your opponent goes to kill one of your creatures. Like, do you really counter it knowing that you give them 2 mana and now you're staring at like Lolth next turn on turn 3? You know, like, is that what you want? Like, so I don't know. This one's a tough one. Like, this is one, and I'm willing to be 100% wrong on this one. But I feel like it reads very well, but is not ultimately going to play out as well as we think it is. I think it will still get some uses and still get some play, but I think the downside is more significant than we're giving it credit for. We didn't get a Welcome to the Family as a card name, but it's in the flavor text. Yeah, I figured that. We got it somewhere. Kiss the Ring, there's no card name for it, but it's the implication in the art of one of the cards. Yeah, but just get it a title. We know it's a thing. Hell, we just made a ring in the last set's commander cards because we have that white ring. It would have been pretty cool to even reference that on a thing. Would have been kind of funny. Like if your opponent has a ring token in play, it has an additional ability or whatever, right? That would have been kind of funny. Are you talking about Assassin's Trophy? Yeah, Assassin's Trophy at least still got played, though. I mean, I still see people casting Assassin's Trophies today. Hell, I saw one at the Hunter Burt Memorial Open in a couple of decks. It was in several deck lists that were doing pretty well on day 2. Out of the way. 3 colorless and a blue. Instant. The spell costs 2 less to cast at the target. Was a green permanent. Return target non-land permanent and opponent controls to its owner's hand. Draw a card. Yeah, I hate it. But it's a pretty good card. Pretty good card. Is it good enough to be main deck playable? Again, I think this is a little tough, right? When we're talking about there being lots of 2 and 3 color decks, the odds of you getting to play this cheap becomes real. Like maybe even 50% of the format with any of these, right? Because you never know. But, I mean, at least as a sideboard card, pretty reasonable. Just getting to bounce your opponent's thing, slow them down, and you get to draw cards, not too bad. It does cost 2 still, so there's probably better things we could do depending on what color we have blue paired with. But if we're just playing mono blue or maybe even blue white, like this is serviceable. So I wouldn't be surprised if I get hit with this a couple of times over the next few weeks, but I don't think it's that strong of a card that you really need to be forcing it into the inclusion of your list. Do I ever play paper? Yes. I mean, I'm on the Commander Advisory Group. If I didn't play paper, that would be quite sad. Psyonix Snoop, 2 colorless and a blue for an 0/3 flash. When Psyonix Snoop enters the battlefield, it connives. Nah, pass. That's all I got to say on that one. Psychic Pickpocket, 4 colorless and a blue for a 3/2. When the Pickpocket enters the battlefield, it connives. When it connives this way, return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So effectively for 5 mana, you get a 3/2, you get to connive, and you get to bounce something. I mean, that's a lot of words that all sound really cool, and I don't hate any of the words, but it is 5 mana for ultimately probably a 4/3. You're hoping at that stage of the game anyway. A 4/3, sometimes realistically going to still be a 3/2, but a 4/3 that gets to bounce a non-land permanent, probably not what we're looking to do. I think we're going to be passing on this a lot from a deck building perspective. Limited though, this ain't bad. If you can get your opponent's best thing or the thing they've spent a lot of turns putting counters on with conniving or whatever, and then you get a 4/2 or 4/3, like, all right, that's not so bad. But in constructed, we don't want this thing. Public Enemy, 2 colorless and a blue, aura, enchant creature, all creatures attacking enchanted creature's controller, each combat. Oh, all creatures attack enchanted creature's controller each combat if able. When enchanted creature dies, draw a card. So this is just an amusing card, right? Like, so you put it on a creature, and then that creature's controller has to take the brunt of every creature each combat. And then, of course, they can block with that creature or whatever. When it dies, you get to draw a card. Does this have any real ability? Not really, though. Here's the thing, like, in some world, you could put this on your own creature. Like, to force your opponent to attack with everything so they can't leave anything back. And in weird creature stalemates, like, that could benefit you. And then you just put it on your chump, it dies, you draw a card. Like, okay, whatever. But realistically, this is something that's going to be more exciting in Commander. Basically putting it on a player, and then everybody has to attack them until this enchantment or the creature it's on is gone. Which is kind of funny if you put it on something that has like indestructible or whatever potentially. But yeah, that's more where this is going to shine. This isn't really a 60 card constructed card. Reservoir Kraken, 2 colorless, blue, 6/6. Kraken, it has trample, ward 2. At the beginning of each combat, if Reservoir Kraken is untapped, an opponent may tap an untapped creature they control. If they do, you also tap the Reservoir Kraken, and you create a 1/1 blue fish creature token with this creature can't be blocked. I think this card is actually pretty damn good. For a couple of reasons. One, if I just drop this against a control deck, and they don't even have any token creatures out, well, they're going to have a hard time dealing with this, because it also has ward 2. And it's a big-ass 6/6 for 4 mana. That's like a real thing. Then, if you're playing against somebody that happens to have creatures, you're basically saying, all right, one of your creatures is going to be tapped every turn, so I get to make an additional creature. Which you can then chump block or not with. They obviously get to attack and they can't be blocked, which is cool. So, I don't know. I'm kind of into this. Like, it's got to be playable. Like, and if you're already playing other things around it, again, blue-red something, blue-green something, right? Like, there's other aggressive ways you can use this card and making the... Hell, if you have things that even trigger off of tokens coming into play, that could be a thing, right? I hadn't even thought about that. So then your opponent's in a real catch-22 situation of, all right, do I somehow find a way to deal with this 6/6 blocking it or whatever, and it has trample at that, or do I just give you a creature every turn that may be triggering your alliance stuff or whatever? Like, maybe. So yeah, I think I'm going to try putting this into a few lists. This card's got to be somewhat playable. Now, the downside, obviously, is if you're playing against like mono white aggro or whatever, and they're tapping their weakest thing, so you can't have your 6/6 and leaving you with a 1/1. Yeah, that's going to suck, and that's going to happen sometimes. But I think it's at least worth the risk. Because worst case scenario, you make a 1/1 every turn. I don't think this is as bad. Like, I think this is a serviceable card. Now, great, no, but definitely serviceable and playable. And if we end up in a world where there are, like I'm saying, if we end up in a world where it's a lot of mid-rangey and control stuff, this card has more value than I think it appears at first glance. Rooftop Nuisance. 2 colorless and a blue. Sorcery. Casualty 1. Tap target creature. It doesn't untap during scroller's untap step. Draw a card. Really good limited card. Not much for constructed, I wouldn't say. It's fighting for the cracking spot in Volo EDH. That's understandable. 4 mana, make a 1/1 each turn is already banned, and they don't even have to tap it. I'm not even sure what that sentence is referencing. Run out of town. 3 colors and a blue. Instant. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it on top or bottom of their library. Again, this is a fine limited card, but not really something we're planning constructed. Not for 4 mana. That's a bit too much. Security Bypass. It's a 2 mana aura enchant creature. As long as the enchanted creature is attacking alone, it can't be blocked. Enchanted creature has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, it connives. This is kind of neat and limited, right? If you end up getting it on your big body and get to attack with it, I just don't know if this is the type of card I really want to play in constructed. But in limited, this is probably going to be the result of some game winners by itself. This seems actually like it could be legit. Sewer Crocodile. 5 colorless and a blue for a 4/6 Crocodile. Pay 3 and a blue. Sewer Crocodile can't be blocked. This ability costs 3 less to activate if there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard. Nah, pass. Sleep with the Fishes. 2 colorless, blue, enchanted aura. Enchant creature. When Sleep with the Fishes enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature, and you create a 1/1 blue fish creature token with this creature can't be blocked. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. This feels like a lot to do for 4 mana. Like, it's 4 mana, enchant a creature, you tap it, you get a 1/1. You basically, like, pseudo remove a thing so you can't be attacked with it, and you get a 1/1. Like, I just feel like we're going to be pairing blue with other things, whether that's black or red or whatever, and we're just going to be able to get rid of the creatures. We're going to be in a world where just tapping a thing or even just pacifying it, it's just not going to be good enough, I don't think. I think we're going to have too many better options. So yeah, this isn't cutting it. Slip out the back. Put a +1/+1 on target creature. It phases out. This actually is a playable card, especially if you're trying to do like mono blue tempo. Maybe you're doing some blue-green something aggro deck, right? And you want to protect a creature from a board sweeper, because Lord knows there's a billion of them. I think when we did last count, now after this set, it's going to be something like, I don't know, I think we said like 7, like almost 20 sweepers, and then another 4 or 5 that are like conditionally okay. So it's a lot. So obviously, you're going to have a lot of sweepers out in the world. And hell, we're probably going to see even more farewell, probably. But this is actually legit. Like, you get a +1/+1, and you get to protect your creature. Like, yeah, I'm okay. I think this is going to see play in several creature-based decks for sure. I don't think this is bad. Undercover Operative, 2 colorless, blue, shapeshifter. It can copy any creature. If it copies one of your own, it comes in with a shield counter. I don't know. I'm not gonna be fair on this card because I'm always down on shapeshifters. I always feel like they just don't ever do enough for me. There's been 1 or 2 over the years that have been fine, but usually I'm almost like, I'd rather just have another creature. You know, like sometimes there are things that you have in play that are good that you'd like a second copy of, or I don't know, maybe your opponent does get that big scary thing and you want to copy it. That's cool. But I don't know. I picture a lot of stuff like if I'm playing against some gruel aggro thing, like, okay, I might get to match up and make a Goldspan Dragon. That's nifty. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's a thing. But against, like, mono-white aggro, like, do I want to add a line without a bunch of other creatures? Probably not. So, like, yeah, shapeshifters just don't get there for me. Like, this might be better than some of the others because it comes in with the shield counter. So I'm willing to concede that fact. But I don't think I'm going to be rushing to put it into any deck list. I want to play Hall of the Clones. This is not generally... Yeah, I'm not a clones person. I think that's what it's all about. Wing Shield Agent. 2 colors and a blue. Human Soldier. 2/3. Wing Shield Agent enters the battlefield with a shield counter on it. Whenever Wing Shield Agent attacks, up to 1 other target creature gains flying until end of turn. You know, on a cost basis, this isn't terrible. It's a 2/3 and it comes in with a shield counter. Kind of cool. The thing is, this attacks and up to 1 other target creature gains flying. So you kind of have to run this into the combat and on the ground to give something else flying. Hey, thanks for subscribing for a tier 1 there, Kingfish. You're going to give something else flying to put this at risk and force you to use your shield counter, right? So, like, that alone makes... Now, if this and the other card got flying, then I would probably give it at least somewhat of a nod of recognition. But unless you just really want shield counters on everything, you're not going to play this card. Wiretapping. 4 colorless and a blue. Enchantment. Hideaway 5. Whenever you draw your first card during each of your draw steps, draw a card. Then, if you have 9 or more cards in hand, you play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. This is interesting because I think if we have a way to get this fairly quickly, not even like a super rampy situation, like let's just say you can get it on turn 4 instead of turn 5. And then every turn thereafter, every time you draw, you're getting an additional draw, right? That adds up to being a lot of cards, even if the game only goes to like turn 8, turn 9. Like, that's a lot of extra cards. Now, you would be investing, like I said, 4 mana or 5 mana or whatever over a couple turns, but that's actually really good. Now, how often are we going to get to play the hideaway card? That's a whole different story. Reality, we probably don't. You know what I mean? Because you're basically saying you have to have a full hand and draw those extra cards to get us to 9 cards. Like, probably not going to happen. And that's kind of the downside on this. But if you really ignore the hideaway part and just say, hey, I get to draw a card every turn, that's actually pretty good. So, like, yeah, I think this is playable, but mostly because it's like a one-sided Howling Mine, not because of the hideaway or anything else. And I would have to have a way that I can get this into play before turn 5. I feel like if it takes me to turn 5 to get this into play, I don't want it as much. But if I can get it before then, I think it's at least worth considering. Witness Protection. 1 blue, enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green and white citizen creature with base power 1 named Legitimate Business Person, which I still find amusing on this card. But yeah, I mean, you get to turn a big creature into a small creature. I don't hate it, but again, I think we're going to be pairing blue with other colors that can probably just kill something outright, especially with several of the new cards, the gold cards that we get to see, the multicolor things. I don't think we necessarily even have to waste too much time with a card like this. Not that it's terrible, but I just don't think we're going to be playing it. All right, and that was the last of the blue cards.